This episode is brought to you by Rad Dudes Who Love Nature.
The other birding is wonderful, but there's something tied to the migration that captures my imagination.
Hello, welcome to the Urban Wildlife Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Crozzo, with
Billy Brown
and our special guest,
Rich Conroy.
Rich is an awesome dude who, this might be the first time we've consummated our bromance by getting together and doing something. But I've known you for at least 10 years.
At least, yeah.
And so I have a professional relationship with you, a business relationship with you.
Yeah.
But I got to know you because just north of where I work in Wissahickon and where I live, also just north of the Philadelphia city limits, is the Militia Hill Hawk Watch, which, even though we are snooty Philadelphians who are like, it's the suburbs, but any other part of the country, it would be just as urban.
It's darn close.
Any other part of the country, the housing density where your Hawk Watch is located is like the same housing density as like Milwaukee or Portland. It's Philadelphia suburbs are like residential neighborhoods of other cities.
And I'd say hawk watching certainly occurs within city limits. We did it at Cops Creek at the golf the golf course is now getting
right.
We have strong different feelings about that, but the golf course, and then also George Armistead had always posted stuff you saw from his yard. You
right.
Stuff you saw in your yard.
And but the other way interface with Rich, besides my visits to the Hawk Watch, where you're just like the awesome dude to talk to there, is you co-own with your wife a franchise of Wild Birds Unlimited, and you provide seed to my nature center.
Yes.
And so buy seed from you. So we want to talk to you both about an urban hawk watch, but also about owning a Wild Birds Unlimited and having a bird feeding store, a birding store. And that to me is absolutely urban wildlife.
With accounts receivable with the city of Philadelphia.
Right.
Yeah.
but also, like your business is 100% predicated on urban, residential backyard wildlife.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of backyard and urban wildlife, I'm not going to say who is with yet, because even though it is official on their end,
did you sign a contract yet?
Haven't signed a contract yet. But
so when you're under contract, I think then you can say
right. Yeah. And one of the not holdups, because this is also the
negotiation's taken 2 years working this out.
Right. Well, it's not really negotiation. There's the I'm writing a book. I have a pending deal with I've been offered a deal with a publisher, a very great publisher, a publisher I couldn't be more excited about. There's going to be a contract very soon. We just have to figure out who is getting what from it. And
the bottom line, exciting part is that we're keeping our fingers crossed. Everything gets, when that contract is in. But soon we'll have a contract, and you'll be writing a book.
Yeah. And the book is, I have been writing a book.
The topic that,
yes, backyard and urban wildlife of North America.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's
and you actually got to write it.
Yeah.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's a field guide to the art. You
very art heavy.
You can't possibly. The writing. I can't imagine not being able to keep up with the art or the writing. You know what I mean? The book is going to take what it takes, and it's mostly because of the art. But it's very excited about this. I think it's going to be great, and ultimately, the thing I want to say about this is a real field guide. This is not a beginner guide. This is not we're treating this, us and a publisher, we want to make a real, a significant field guide to this, and anthropogenic biome, you know, and
Yeah.
it's a guide in a sense of, yeah, can you use this guide to identify what you see, you know, within city limits, within residential areas? Absolutely. And almost everything you could possibly see will be in this book. You know, there's, you know, a few, we might have to cut a few things out, but they would be so rarely encountered, you know, that it wouldn't really, you know,
Yeah.
but it's also going to be a guide to how to live with these creatures and how to be a good host to them.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to provide, you know, it's going to be, someone who isn't, you know, inclined to purchase field guides for every taxonomic group, you know, this could be their one only guide and they would probably be just fine with it. But because we do live in the world where there are other field guides to these taxonomic groups, we're going to focus on the information that's going to be specific to, you know, the built landscape, the residential areas and urban areas. So we're going to have, even if you have, like us, probably all of us here at this table right now, even if you have field guides to every, you know, terrestrial vertebrate taxonomic group that will be covered by this book, it's still going to provide you really good information. I think even the most seasoned naturalist, it will provide good information because this is what we specialize in. And so I'm really excited about it. And I really I can't wait to say who is, you know, officially who is producing it, because I want to praise them if there's opportunity, and they've been wonderful to work with so far, specifically one person in general.
And then when you have it in print, you can come give a talk at the store.
Of course.
Yeah, there we
absolutely.
go.
I mean, I would be honored, you know, absolutely.
I'd love that. That would be awesome.
It'd be so cool too, because if I do like a, you know, tour or whatever, like it's going to be to cities and towns where, you know, it's going to be fun, you know, because like, and then we can, you know, go flipping for curtain snakes in Indianapolis, right? Indianapolis.
Yeah. No, I almost, my heart sank a little bit because I did once go to Indianapolis looking for Kirtland snakes and didn't find them. But yeah, that's a tough taxon right there. That's the interesting. It's a little, no one outside of the herping world, you wouldn't have heard of this. It's a small snake. Basically, it's a kind of water snake, but kind of terrestrial. If you saw it, you might think it was a funky looking garter snake, with kind of 2 rows of dark black spots down the back and a pink belly. And they live in, basically they're Midwestern snakes, used to occur in Western PA, but they're probably extirpated. And they've got a strong association with a kind of like marsh crayfish that build these kind of chimneys. And so your classic way to find them is in there, in the chimneys that the crayfish build. I think particularly in fens, like alkaline wetlands. And then they, for a while, were not too hard to find, like around Cincinnati and Indianapolis. I didn't find them. I looked in Cincinnati, Indianapolis. I heard that they're getting less common. It's just vacant lots or marginal wet areas that they lived in and gotten built up. And also just snakes in a urban landscape. Unless they're real small, there's just constant attrition with roads, mortality and stuff. And they're one of these things that I bet they'll be endangered not too long, just as an animal in general that's in decline. But they're a neat snake. I would love to find one. I would extra love to find one in urban setting, like in Cincinnati or Indianapolis. So my next road trip out to the Midwest, I'll look again.
So is the crayfish something that they eat, or?
No, good question. No, they're probably mostly eating worms and stuff.
Okay. So do they evict the crayfish from the?
I don't know. It's funny.
Or do they abandon it? And
that's
the snake moves
that's
in?
an interesting ecology question. I don't
Maybe
know
it's like
the
with the goby and the shrimp that like live together.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I did once. It was it was a historic spot in Cincinnati that I tracked down from incidentally found reading about something else, about a herpetologist who in his youth had caught Kirtland snakes at a certain spot, and I was like, well, I can find that. And then I looked it up, and instead of being like a equipment yard, which was what it had been like in 1910, now it had like a 4-lane like kind of highway running through it, and it was all wooded, so it wasn't the open area it used to be. But I went in there anyways. I saw some crayfish like chimneys. I got so excited. I had to like trespass and hack my way back into this place, like through all interesting brush and stuff. And I got in there, and I found, like, honestly, like it was like a flat rock on top of a crayfish chimney. It was like, I was like, this thing was like screaming out. There's a snake underneath it, and I picked it up, and I saw a snake, and my heart like leapt. And it was a garter snake. And I was like, damn it. It's like, you're not
Foiled again.
You're not the snake I'm looking for. But that was a neat trip. I found also in Cincinnati, there's a population, an introduced population of Italian wall lizards. There's two kinds of wall lizards that have introduced populations in the United States. I forget which one that is. But I did find the wall lizards. So I was able to find, we actually did a podcast episode on those a few years ago.
We had the song.
Yes, Wonder Wall Lizards.
Yeah, which is cool. Which is
how timely, right? Aren't they back together?
Oasis 7. I don't know. Speaking of Oasis, the Wonder Wall Lizard and whatnot, and Oasis reunion. Here's an urban wildlife sighting I had. Definitely wild, and they were alive. One of them. So this is like in the 90s. This is record store on South Street, just off of South Street. So I go in this record store, and it's funny because back in the day, like I sold all my records. I used to have like 1,500 records. And this is like 10 years before I had adult money, any kind of adult money. So I don't know what I would have now. I wouldn't have room for my fish tanks now, which I'll talk about my new session at some point. But anyway, we should just have a catch up podcast next. Maybe but I was in this record store, and it's around a corner from a venue. I'm in there, and
Tony used to be in the business of organizing punk shows.
Yeah. Although, what did I organize this show I'm about to talk about? And I think you know what I'm getting at. So I'm in the record store, and there's just kind of I get a sense there's like a vibe of like tension, excitement, and I'm just like looking, and I started buying records because they were cheaper at the time than CDs. Like that's why
they were going out of style in terms of technology.
So I started buying, it's just funny to think about it now. So I'm looking for like, Subhumans in Conflict and Crass Records, whatever. And there's these two guys, looking for records or whatever. I don't know if they bought anything or not, but then they leave the store, and everybody in the store is just like, oh my God, it was the Gallagher brothers.
Really?
Yeah. Nolan and Gallagher were together because it was for the feud, and they were in the record store together, record shopping, and everybody was just trying to be cool. Because it's like, it's records. It's like, think about like, this is literally like Philly's version of like, High Fidelity, like that kind of store, right? So
you don't want to be, you're too cool to.
Everybody in that store is too cool to be like, and
to get an autograph. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, also too, probably like, and they probably liked Oasis, but they were probably looking for like replacements records or like what I mean, like whatever, and like liked Oasis, but were like not all about it, but still probably really, dude, they're all really stoked, but they all wanted they all wanted to pretend they were too cool, but when they left, they were like, dude, that was the Gallagher brothers. Yeah. All right, let's talk about Rich.
We're watching. We're good, man.
So Rich,
I'm enjoying listening to everything.
Yeah, but you're just a person that like, I'm glad we're friends. I'm glad we have a relationship.
I appreciate you saying that.
But you're just a person that like, I've always enjoyed running to you in the field. I've always enjoyed. I know I ran into Andy. Were you on the trip in Algonquin? We ran into each other a couple times.
I think yes.
Right. I remember running you up there. Like,
Great Owls, right? Did we cross?
Yeah, it's funny because I felt like I'm glad we're hanging out now, but I felt like there was like, it's funny. It's like the Diller Valley Ornithological Club is like Philly's default bird club because it's like Philly doesn't have a bird club for just Philly.
When you say it, we have the Audubon chapters that recently got reconciled in a way, but it's more than Philly,
right? So Philadelphia, it's almost at least the Pennsylvania side, every county has almost every county around Pennsylvania has its own. I know Bucks County does. I know Delaware County, Chester. They all have their own bird clubs. I don't know if Montco does or not. Maybe it
That
does.
would be Wincote would probably handle.
So there's Bucks County Bird Club. There's
The
Chester County.
Bird Club.
And there's a Bucks County.
And Valley
But
Forge is
then
other big
the
one.
Audubon, if you're a member of Audubon, not the National Audubon, because there are non-affiliated like Mass Audubon, New Jersey Audubon, Belize Audubon, which is somehow affiliated with Mass Audubon. But there's the National Audubon, and they have local Audubons that are part of that, and they're like
chapters. Yeah.
chapters. And so Philly has 2 chapters, Valley Forge and Wincote, but they're centered just outside city limits, and they cover part of Philly. But Philly, the DVOC is, even though it's a Delaware Valley, which is the whole region, good part of Pennsylvania, good part of about half of New Jersey, about almost all of Delaware falls within the Delaware Valley. But that's kind of the default Philadelphia club. We even have like this imprint we call Bird Philly. But I was part of the DVOC, and we had like, it's funny, like now, after COVID, especially now we have all these other bird clubs, In Color Bird Club, queer, trans, and like feminist. But like before, like it's literally my 20th anniversary of getting into the DVOC. So I joined when I was 28, and I was like a baby. I was considered to be like really young. In fact, and like I just saw Marty Delwood yesterday. I was running and there was a Higgin, but like he's like 20 years older than me, and he joined around the same time. He was considered young because he was like in his like late 40s.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? This is literally like birding in 20 years ago. If you were like younger than, I'm no exaggeration. If you were younger than 60, you were kind of like the younger, especially if you're younger than 50. If you're younger than 50, you're a younger birder. But again, as I had like my crew, like Steve Kaser, and I guess Rob and Nicholas and Roger, like, we had Marty, I guess.
I always cross paths with you and Dan.
Dan Everson. Then Dan Everson and whatnot, especially Dan Everson. Unfortunately, Steve died, and Rob and Nicholas and Roger moved away to Australia. Nicholas was just here, awesome dude. But anyway, me and Dan, we'd always run into you and Andy just had a stroke. He's not doing very well. But we run and a couple other guys. I remember being like, literally saying to Dan, like, how are we not like friends with? How are we not like hang out with these guys? Like it's just like it's by default, but like they seem like they're a lot like us. Like we're like and so like, and I'm glad that like we I get to see you like at least every 6 weeks or so when you bring birdseed by.
Which is more than we used to just cross paths every
and now and also like I thought I would do more than I did, but I remember I went to, when I was going back to school at Temple Ambler, I literally brought we'd have days where like the schedule would be so weird where like, I had no exaggeration, it was like at least an 8-hour break between classes.
Wow.
Right. And I was like, because I had like evening class and I was like,
You're stuck out there.
and I was like, do I
As a guy who doesn't drive.
and I don't drive, and there's a shuttle bus from Philly up to the Ambler campus, from the Center City campus to Ambler campus. But I ended up like bringing a bike up to, and a few times I thought I was going to do it more regularly than I did, but I did a few times. But I would literally like leave my bike on campus and then bike to the Hawk Watch, and hang out with you. I thought it'd be a regular thing, but like, you guys was awesome. But let's talk about how I met you at the Militia Hawk Watch.
Back up, actually.
Sure.
We're talking like a Hawk Watch, like everybody knows what we're talking about.
Okay.
Oh, and and we are in Pennsylvania, which is, tell me I'm wrong, but would you say Pennsylvania? Are you saying the most? I don't even know.
Hawk Watch.
The most Hawk Watches, but
in a state,
and it has the most Hawk Watches in the state, but also it has arguably the most famous Hawk Watch in the world, probably, right?
At least in the eastern portion, probably the most famous in the world. That's a good way to.
I watch Hawks all the time, but what is a Hawk Watch? Yeah.
So a Hawk Watch would be you're basically a stationary spot that's counting migration movement.
Yeah.
I mean, there's different
probably versions.
Have you heard that?
Probably,
Visbig, visible migration.
yeah.
Visbig.
You can consider yourself at a hawk watch if you're looking at up in the air
Sure.
for, you're looking for raptor movement.
Yeah.
But I guess what I would say is it's the spring or the fall migration.
Right.
And then you're spanning a period of time so that you'll, different species migrate at different times, so that you're capturing the migration of these species down a particular flyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a way you come together and you're looking. We were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, that some places are particularly good points in the landscape to see how birds are being funneled in by landscape features like ridgelines.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll get to the ridgelines in a second. So I'm going to say we'll end with ridgelines because that's what you're at. But I think the traditional places where hawk watches tend to be located are peninsulas. Right. Cape May is a good example. Right.
Yeah.
They get funneled into this peninsula because it points south, and at either end of a strait.
Yeah, or lake shores and things.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah. So like I believe there's two, and so urban hawk watches aren't actually, now we're going to get to ridges in a minute. So it seems counterintuitive because the most famous hawk watch probably in the world
Hawk
at least,
Mountain,
is Hawk Mountain, and it's literally on a mountain. And so we generally don't think about mountains in cities because mountains tend to be one of the few places you can't have a city, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, because it's a mountain, it's like steep. It's hard to build stuff there, right? So
True.
mountains tend to be some of the least urban places.
Yeah.
But with that said, the other features, peninsulas and straits, are often where there are lots of
Human,
people.
yeah.
So
Because they-
Eilat,
Yep.
Israel is I guess
Yeah.
I guess you call it like kind of an isthmus, right? Like it's like
That's like on the Red Sea.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like where Asia and Africa meet, and there's
Yep.
like it funnels everything.
And
It's a little,
yeah.
piece of land between Asia and also so a strait would be the Bosphorus, right? And so Istanbul is known for being another hawk
It's a
watch.
real old city.
So people apparently in Eilat, Israel, and also Istanbul, people literally just like hawk watch from rooftop city. But maybe the best hawk watch in the world is Veracruz in
Oh,
Mexico,
yeah.
which is it's kind of an isthmus. Mexico kind of forms an isthmus there. This is isthmus before Panama. Had an isthmus, but also functionally it's like two things. They're forced along the shore of the Gulf of Mexico, but also there's a mountain range there where they're kind of, so people count hawks from rooftops in Veracruz to the point where they get blisters on their fingers from the counters because
Yes.
there's literally
It's awesome. to
sometimes
see.
millions.
Read
Have you
Scott-
been there?
I've been lucky enough to go once. Yeah.
Oh, my
2016,
God.
Oh
yeah.
man, you read
So
Scott
please-
Wiedenstall's
so-
book- read Scott
Yeah.
Wiedenstall's,
Yeah,
who I can't remember if we had on the podcast in some form.
you did. You did a great interview with him, and then
And I posted that. Yes.
yes,
Um,
that was actually I think it was like in the spring, which is our last episode before this one.
so he his writings about the hawk watching in Veracruz are mind blowing.
Yeah, it is.
Just like because you kind of have like almost a whole continent's worth of
Yeah.
birds
And certain species, the entire population funnels through.
Right.
Yeah.
going over this relatively narrow stretch of shoreline. And I mean, it was, you had the hawks, also
And you
like
have
the
everything.
chimney
Pelicans,
swifts
you have
and
all
stuff.
kind of, you have
Yeah.
any manner of large groupings of birds that migrate together.
I heard, like,
that just sounds awesome.
And
That's
I heard the thing about Veracruz is like things people didn't even realize were migratory. Sure,
Yeah.
they're like
Yeah.
wood storks and white pelicans, and also hook-billed kites.
Yeah.
Things like that.
And I gotta tell you, for someone who likes sitting in one place, the fact that my hotel room was in the hotel where the hawk watch is, and then you basically just go up the stairs. The elevators, I don't know if it's any different, but the elevators don't tend to run as much. So I did actually have to walk stairs, which, it's probably good for me. But being able to just go to the roof and be at the hawk watch, and just a little context, we were there for a week. We saw the amount of birds we saw in the week was greater than 30 years of the count at Militia Hill.
right.
So you would think that would make me more, less inclined. It actually made me more inclined to count at Militia Hill because I saw what Militia Hill is part of. the birds that are going over us eventually end up in Veracruz.
Well, that's just I
And
feel like
it's
we're already getting to
so
what for
cool.
me is the punchline is that like that we don't have a lot of broad-winged hawks in Philadelphia. Is that fair to say?
I don't think they're as in like breeding or
Just take a species.
Yeah.
Just to say that we have, for me, one of the magical things about migration of bird migrations is the way that in a city
It brings other species.
we can have
Yep.
we can be part of
Yep.
the sort of hemispheric scale ecology, and so we're when a Blackburnian warbler, when I see one of those picking caddisflies off of a catalpa tree on the edge of the Delaware, this time of year, or later, I don't know, but around now, and that sucker's about to take off for what, Venezuela.
yeah.
And it could have come from Alaska, could have come from Quebec, but it's we're sort of taking part in something that's spanning the globe, and so
the connectivity.
yeah, and that's for me is part of this magic. How like you'll see when I hear Tony, I forget your status of having seen a golden eagle in Philadelphia.
I finally got one from my driveway.
There you go. So that's a bird that's probably what, like in the Maritime provinces or something.
I think
Sure.
I think the Gaspé Peninsula.
Yeah.
And like also Angava, like the top of Quebec, and
And where's it going?
Golden Eagles, from what I understand, the Golden Eagles in the East winter in what
Down the Appalachians.
they winter in valleys in the Appalachians in like Kentucky and West Virginia.
Right there.
There's also some of them do winter in salt marshes, but most of the ones originally I think are all headed to like these valleys in the Appalachians. Yeah,
Yeah, you got those. I mean, you've got and then you have various other hawks that are coming from
but
all
the broadwing,
points north,
Yeah.
like
yeah,
going to South
and
America.
and
man.
and ospreys. So the ospreys we see migrating.
Oh yeah.
So I had the privilege of I almost thought about a book writing a book. If I ever wrote a book about my travels, it might be like the year I was a solitary sandpiper, because like when I worked in Alaska and we had we had traps for ducks. Some would be like on shore for like grain, and sometimes we get lesser yellow legs and solitary sandpipers in there, they're so tiny.
Yeah.
And that same year, so I was in Alaska in the summer, and then September I did a semester in Brazil, and so in the city of Curitiba, one of the best cities for urban wildlife. We're going to do maybe one of the next episodes we're going to do. Hopefully you could be a part of it too. Work it out is another crossover with Nationally Adventurous. And we're going to talk about like top cities for urban wildlife, but Curitiba is going to be one of mine. And the like grass around the parking lot was like wet, and I literally saw lesser yellowlegs and solitary sandpipers, and I'm like, I could have
Could be the same bird.
It could
have been the same bird that I just handled. But also, when I was and I got out of camp and I was in Fairbanks for a couple of days, I saw an osprey. And probably one of the farthest north ospreys you can see, because you go much farther north than that, there's no more trees for them to nest in.
Yeah.
And I saw an osprey fishing in a lake in Alaska, and then I was on the Amazon in Santa Rema because I went back to school later in life, and I was basically just going through the motions. I was like, I just need a degree, so someone will pay me a decent wage to do what I like to do.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like over it, because I was like, I was already a really well seasoned naturalist. That's why I got into went to school for horticulture of plants, because I wanted to expand my knowledge. Best decision ever made. But anyway, so I was already kind of over going to school, and I saw like Antioch had it was a flyer. It happened to be on a bulletin board in my at Ambler, and it said Brazilian ecosystems and biodiversity management. I was like, fucking ad. So I went this semester abroad in Brazil, which is amazing, because I met all these like all the researchers I met were like, so a lot of them were younger than me, and they considered me a peer because I did all this field work. In fact, I probably told you about this, but I spent a month in the state of Sao Paulo, but in the city of Sorocaba, at a federal university there, with Augusto Prattelli, who who knew Rob Biergard because he was part of the whole SLOS, a single large, several small, Amazon like fragmentation project.
Yeah.
But anyway, I worked with him for a month in there, and just because I had just come from Alaska. Literally, the teacher I worked for was a pain in the ass and wouldn't tell me what kind of visa I needed for Brazil before I left. I was like, I'm going to Alaska. And so my parents, I wasn't living with my parents at the time.
Brazil is tricky for visas. Yeah.
Right. And now it's easier, but then it was harder. And I had so I wasn't living with my parents at the time. I had been on my own for like 10 years or so, but I'm very close to my parents. But my parents literally had to like help me get my visa, and like they like got a broker or something to help get it, and like out of New York because New York's consulate or whatever. But like, no exaggeration, we're doing this study of ducks, looking at the guy I worked for. He was studying how avian influenza affects ducks. We'll talk about these glasses in a minute. Talk about how avian influenza affects ducks, their health. But because speaking of connectivity, so where I was in Alaska is a duck factory.
Sure.
And so in Alaska, I wasn't like in the Yukon Delta, or I was in the dead middle of Alaska, Yukon Flats, and kind of near Fairbanks. Although near Fairbanks is a 7-hour boat ride, or a like half
in the middle of nowhere.
I took a float plane to where I was.
It was you and a few billion mosquitoes.
And but regardless, it's still relatively close to Siberia, and it's not very far. So
You're closer to Siberia than you were to Philadelphia.
Absolutely. Oh, by a long shot. But where we were, speaking of connectivity, the ducks, like a lot of species of bird, of waterfowl, I mean, also other species too, are circumpolar because, there's a bear, they used to be connected not that long ago. Siberia and Alaska were connected, and it's not very far, especially if you can fly.
Mm-hmm.
So like literally like there's lots of birds that
what if you're like a snow goose or a eider or something like that?
Yeah, but in this case specifically pintails.
Okay.
So a pintail that we had these traps. They were like a square trap, and in the middle we'd have a captive hen of a mallard, pintail, widgeon, and I think scaup. I forget. And so the male ducks would go and try to step to them, and they get trapped. Right?
Yeah.
It didn't happen on my thing, but using the same trap in another camp nearby, they go to check the traps, and there's a fucking lynx in the trap.
Just that already ate the female?
No, it couldn't get to it, but it tried to, but it got caught.
I got caught in the trap.
And so they had
someone had to like extract this.
So they put they put an oar, like wedged it open, and so because this trap's like spring loaded, and like opened it up, and it like, ran out. But I'll tell you what, you'd be surprised. We had other things like swim into these traps, like different species of ducks. I'm like, why are you trying to like? Yeah. Sometimes it was females. Are like, this is a female. Why? I guess they're territorial, but mule gulls. And by the way, gulls. I know people think gulls are attractive birds, but seeing a mule, being able to handle a mule gull, or there's a video of me.
Mew,
MEW. They split them up from the Siberian ones. Now I think it's called, what is it, slender-billed gull?
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a smaller, it's like ring-billed gull size, but like all yellow bill. But this gulls are up close. I mean, they're attractive birds, but can't take it for granted. This was like stunningly beautiful. Where like I was caught on video being like, "Oh my God, you're gorgeous!" I couldn't believe how beautiful this bird was. But anyway,
you only have to see an ivory gull or a Ross's gull.
True, but this bird was gorgeous. And also, by the way, a herring gull in fresh breeding plumage is stunning.
Great blackbacks
and great light.
No, they're all blackbacks are
beautiful birds.
Laughing gulls are really beautiful birds.
Yeah.
People,
but they're also
goers in our region hate them. Because they steal your French fries, but they're everywhere. But they're beautiful birds. Yeah.
So, a couple times we got redneck grebes, but a couple times we got corn grebes. And I've heard, another thing you do is you own a franchise of Wild Birds Unlimited
I do.
and feeding birds. Have you heard about that? Like Carolina wrens and other pointy-billed little birds bully because their bill is so sharp, they're able to bully other birds away from. Have you heard about that? I've heard of this.
I think I've seen it. You know, when I think about when I watch behavior
I
at,
bring this
at
up.
feeders, I think I've seen that type of activity. but
Yes,
yeah.
birds. I have been surprised in other ways of which birds are the bullies.
Red-bellied woodpeckers.
I've
I've
seen
seen
I've heard
individual
the
birds,
birding
yeah.
doves are kind of
They can be.
abusers. Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I think now that you said that to me, if I just said it quickly, I think it's almost like there's personalities within species. Some of them
Yeah.
are more within the
yeah.
species.
It's
Some
true.
are more aggressive than
But I will say, as someone who's banded birds, one that before, like, a robin is. I looked it up last night. I did a nighthawk program, and it's kind of like stationary birding. We're sitting in one spot waiting for the nighthawks to fly over, and they did. But I was talking. People asked me questions, and instead of someone who knows, I'm an expert. I would say I'm an expert on birds, and
I would say so.
yeah, and but it's funny what the things that you haven't thought to look up before or whatever. And I was like, oh, what a common nighthawk? What can I compare it to in size? Right?
It's funny because you don't see them in your hand. Like they're always a
Yeah,
bird
they're
flying.
flying,
by.
yeah.
I've told people I'm like they're not actually hawks, and they're significantly smaller than even the smallest hawk, like
Yeah.
a kestrel.
Yeah.
And they got these long wings, which
right.
be a little deceptive.
So it turns out that I'm trying to think about what species
comparable species. Yeah,
and so they're like they're actually in terms of like mass and length, not wingspan, they're much longer wingspan, but in a mass and length, they're actually in between robin and blue jay.
yeah, okay.
But robin and blue jay are pretty close in size, so they're all
Yeah.
It was
and for those we've mentioned nighthawks are these aerial insect eating birds that fly at dusk and dawn, mostly
Crepuscular.
crepuscular.
One of my favorites.
Great word. And they like to nest on gravel surfaces, and so you see them sometimes nesting in cities on gravel roofs, and then
specifically in Philadelphia, not necessarily gravel, but row house roofs, which are like tar roofs.
Yeah, the
but
slag.
but they are often usually not very well maintained, and eventually they start crumbling, so it ends up almost being like gravel pebble. So people birders like to do like year lists or whatever, or even big years. But so when people do in Pennsylvania, when people do a big year or year list for Pennsylvania, often this is funny. Sometimes Pennsylvanians will have a nighthawk could be a challenging bird for them, but honestly, your best bet to see a nighthawk would be to go to where I'm from, the lower northeast Philadelphia, Mayfair, Wyoming,
all these
which
old warehouses and stuff.
row houses.
Oh yeah.
So I grew up in a row house. Both the houses, when I was born to 12 and 12 to 20, I lived in a row house. And I also lived in row houses after that. And now it's the first time in my life I've ever lived in a building. And at my house now was the first time I've ever lived in a building that not attached to another building,
Yeah.
at least on one side.
Yeah.
But anyway, so flat row house roofs. So in Northeast Philly, Germantown, North Philly, South Philly, parts of West Philly, in like June, you walk around any of those neighborhoods, you hear ramp, ramp, ramp. They're everywhere. And you go to a playground or what, they're hawking insects at the lights. I used to see them at the vet at the old Philly Stadium.
No, Robin, a friend of ours, Robin, you're sorry, saw him at the baseball stadium in Philadelphia a few years ago.
Another bird that could be challenging for Pennsylvanians is laughing gull. But because laughing gulls are
You see him around the Delaware. I see him around
Fort
Delaware
Mifflin.
sometimes.
right, but most
Something-
Pennsylvanians,
Are
yes.
way inland from
So-
the
so
Delaware.
think about- Yes, Pennsylvanians who live, a lot of Pennsylvanians live near Philadelphia because we're, the biggest city, whatever. But if you don't live near Philadelphia, or even if you live in Philadelphia, if you live in the Philadelphia area, but don't go into Philadelphia, especially if part of Philadelphia is by the Delaware River, like you don't see laughing gulls because laughing gulls are they breed in salt marshes and hang out on the beach. So you don't see them, but there's a population for laughing gulls that breed so nearest breeding populations of Philadelphia are in the salt marshes on the Delaware Bay, just south of Philadelphia,
Sure.
and due east of Philadelphia by 40 miles is the bay. So it's New Jersey, with Delaware River. Then we have New Jersey, and it's about 30, 40 miles wide. And then there's like so Jersey has barrier islands, right? And there's a bay between the barrier island and the
Sure.
there's a barrier island meets the ocean, and then inland to the bay, and there's salt marshes that line that. So they breed on these, so they breed on the Atlantic coast in the salt marshes, and they breed in Delaware Bay. Either way, it's probably 20. Delaware Bay is probably 40 miles south. The Atlantic Ocean is the bay is probably 40 miles east. Laughing gulls fly inland, to feed on the dump directly north of Philadelphia, just outside, literally just over the Philadelphia line in the Bucks County. It's a massive landfill.
Mm-hmm.
So these laughing gulls literally fly into Philadelphia airspace along the river to get, and sometimes stop on a Walmart parking lot or piers or on Delaware River, flying up to the so they, thank you. I just spilled so Rich told me he likes wine. So because he's my bro, we got some rosé, which we're calling brosé tonight.
Nice.
So anyway, I just spilled some wine. So literally, like, it sounds so disgusting, but these laughing gulls are like flying through Philadelphia airspace and stopping along on the way to a landfill to eat garbage, to fly to their salt marsh nesting areas, to regurgitate garbage to their young.
Yep. And but to get back, so back to the nighthawks. But this time of year also were the nighthawk. One of the cool things about nighthawks, aside from that they live in cities, they eat bugs and salt, and they have interesting sounds they make, is they also have an incredibly long migration. They head out to the Pampas in
Bolivia, right, and all that, and Brazil.
Yeah, well, I think beyond that, into
Beyond
Argentina.
that, okay, Argentina, yeah.
So these are birds that are going from cities where you might live, or will be flying through cities where you might live, and ending up like on the other side of tropical South America into basically temperate South America.
Yeah. And a quick
it's the best time of year to see them in any kind of numbers.
Yeah.
Like
they congregate. They congregate.
And what's they'll make what is the function of the
booming?
noise?
So when they are breeding, unfortunately in the
But
city,
I've seen it like in this time of year also. Like
oh really?
Like I've heard it's like a warning thing, but I wasn't sure.
I don't know they did that outside of breeding, but so even though they breed in numbers in Philadelphia, I think because of the ambient noise, you don't really hear their display. But in quieter places like the Piney Barrens, we'd go see them, and the males songbirds, which are about half of the birds of the world, are actually in one order, right? Yeah. And they actually have the syrinx, the voice box is modified to make beautiful songs.
Yeah.
Well, most other birds don't have that. The other, I guess 55% of birds don't have that. So often, they might make like a vocalization as like, like a croak or like a, whatever. But so fair amount of birds, they, or some birds even clack their bills, like some owls, some sort.
When we talk about mourning doves, there's like another one that makes noises with
their wings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So some birds do, they have structures on their feathers of their wings or some of their tail, like snipe or whatever, but where they'll fly up and then they will dive down, and the wind and the force of wind through their feathers and make a noise.
Yeah.
And then of course, there's a thing called a jake brake. If you've been on a highway and you heard a tractor trailer go,
yeah,
it's called a jake brake. It's this thing. And nighthawks make a noise very much like that jake brake noise. If if you've been on a highway, you definitely heard tractor trailers make this noise. It's some sort of brake. But yeah, they force the wind through their feathers, the air for the feathers. But you don't usually hear in a city because I think the ambient noise. Although you do hear their bam, bam, their little bitch noise. But real quick, speaking of that, bam. So when I first started dating my wife, she had an apartment in South Philadelphia with a skylight. And when I would use the bathroom, when I sit on a can or whatever, chill, in the summer, in the day, I would hear laughing gulls. And at night, I'd hear nighthawks.
Wow.
So two for Pennsylvanians, two more sought after birds
Yeah.
that are easy to see if you're a Philadelphian. I would hear them just like, hanging out with my girlfriend who ended up being my wife and the mother of my child.
You reminded me of the Herper from Central PA who once was like, I'm coming to Philadelphia. I wasn't able to hang out with him. He's coming to Philadelphia and he's like, where can I see red-bellied turtles? And I was like, what do you mean? Where can't you see red-bellied turtles? And it was because this is a species that's a coastal plain species.
Yeah.
And Pennsylvania only has one little corner of coastal plain. That's where we live. And so it was a similar kind of thing where I take them for granted as being
Yeah.
as go to most bridges over a river. You'll see a lot of red-eared sliders, but you really might see some red bellies. And I guess it was a
Well, this is a good segue.
laughing gulls or a similar thing.
This is a good segue because you're talking about red-bellied turtles, which are threatened or state endangered in Pennsylvania.
Threat. And it's basically because the state's biggest urban area is smack over their only habitat in the state.
Right, because Pennsylvania is the geological province of Pennsylvania is mostly ridge and valley and other like
The Allegheny Plateau.
there's these
There
like
you go.
these like glaciated plateaus, which we think are mountains. They're technically not. They're just it's almost negative
I'm sorry.
topography.
I'm laughing because when Gigi and I my wife and I were camping at World's End State Park, which is in the Allegheny Mountains, and we're reading every state park I've ever been to has like the geology history of the place, and they're talking about how like technically like they're not Allegheny Mountains, it is an incised plateau.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Which is funny because technically where we are right now in Philadelphia, in the part of Philadelphia that's in the Piedmont, which is French for foothills,
Yeah.
technically the Piedmont is more or less the same geological feature as the Ridge Valley Appalachians.
It's the folds, they're just not that big yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a cool segue because we're going to get to why Militia Hill Hawkwatch is a good Hawkwatch is because Philadelphia, most of Philadelphia is a coastal plain, which there is some like harder rock underneath, but mostly it's
Sediment washed down.
yeah, it's washed down sediment from the Appalachians, which are older than Himalayas. At one point, were taller than Himalayas, and so when they eroded, and then also glaciers and whatnot too.
Yeah.
There's all this like eroded material that forms the flat
Forms New Jersey.
Yeah.
forms of Jersey, but also more than half of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And then just south of where we are right now in my house, between where I live and where Billy lives, is a neighborhood called East Falls, named for the falls on the Schuylkill River,
Fall line, yeah.
right? Which is the fall line, which is the marks between the coastal plain and Piedmont, and many cities in this part of the country, and also throughout the world where there is a coastal plain and Piedmont, are located at the fall line because this is, before we had roads and rail lines and whatnot, rivers were how we did commerce. And so this is as far inland as you can get before there you could take a ship before there is a fall, before there is.
And also the falls would drive machinery for
Right. So
yeah.
Many cities, right? Like New York City is a harbor, but like south of New York City, like Philadelphia, Richmond, I think DC,
Trenton,
Atlanta,
I think,
like
yeah, you get into the south.
there's also ones in like the Mississippi kind of has something too. Basically, like lots of, and more than half of the country lives in the east, and cities that are basically here because this is as far inland as you can get. And then there's, I kind of learned this recently, there's a second kind of, these smaller cities is where apparently like Scranton and Allentown and whatnot are cities where basically as far inland as trains could go before they had technology to make tunnels for the mountains. So there's these like smaller cities, which is, those smaller cities are located right at the first mountain ridge, which is where Hawk Mountain and the other Hawk Watches are located. So we're going to segue to why is Militia Hill, we're talking about the coastal plain, the Piedmont, and then eventually to the Ridge Valley. So take it away, Rich.
So Militia
Explain
Hill,
why Militia Hill is there.
What we've kind of derived after, this will be our 37th year counting, but if you think about when these birds are coming down, most of the raptors that we're going to count come from, I want to say New England, that type of part of the flyway, right? So if they're coming down through one of the spots that we kind of coalesce with in terms of numbers is Quaker Ridge and Greenwich, and then you're looking at Montclair, which is along the, I forget what those mountains are there.
Greenwich, Connecticut.
Well, Greenwich, Connecticut,
Yeah, right.
when you're coming down there. But when you think about where Montclair is, the I forget what the name of those mountains are, and I grew up in North Jersey. But anyway, so when the birds are coming down, if they're going to stay, the line kind of curves out through Allentown, and the Kittatinny comes back around through Hawk Mountain. If weather conditions are right and they stay to the east, they're going to end up passing over Militia Hill, because Militia Hill is probably on that last, we'll call it a ridge line. It's not that high, but I guess when we talk about what the birds would see when they're flying topographically, right? They know they want to tack back to the southwest. They don't want to get back out off of the Piedmont or out into the coastal plain, because they want to migrate, especially broadwings that aren't going to fly.
Well, we'll say the
water.
ridge lines are useful also because you get the catch up drafts coming
Yes.
off the ridges.
Yeah.
Right. So Hawk Mountain, arguably the world's most famous hawk watch,
Get updrafts on both sides of the ridge.
and is so.
About 45 minutes to an hour.
So the birds
to
don't want to work
northwest.
they want to save energy.
Yes.
So they catch rising air.
Yes.
They'll sort
thermals.
of they'll
Yep.
catch a thermal or the wind coming up a ridge, and they get really high and then glide
down till they
next
find the next one.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
most of the Appalachian Mountains are, most of them are what we call ridge and valley, where they're like, unlike the Rocky Mountains, which have like a defined like peak and point or whatever, and kind of like conical more or less. The Appalachians are a series of ridges, that have about 1,000 to 4,000 feet rise, depending on the part of the, within North Carolina versus here.
Yeah.
And they are about and they're literally 100 to 300 or 400 miles long.
The ridges they'll span several states.
You're right. So it's funny, you were calling this the last ridge. The ridge you're on, the
At least
Militia
when
Hill,
I'm facing east.
right? So, if you think about most of Pennsylvania, like the bulk of Pennsylvania is these ridges, and then a little bit of like lower level stuff on either side, like the Pittsburgh side, the Philadelphia side, but then between the ridge and the mountain, technically mountains with I think a mountain you have 1,000 feet rise, right? So the Kittatinny Ridge, the first one, also called Blue Mountain in some places, so it literally goes from New York State into Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. And that's where Hawk Mountain and some other hawk watches, and that's like that's like the last or first. It's like the furthest east proper mountain of these ridges.
Yeah.
But then you have like smaller ridges, obviously on the way up to getting to 1,000 feet. But the first proper ridge or last proper ridge, depending on how you're looking at it, where the Piedmont starts, you have the Piedmont. So the Piedmont literally translate, I think I said before, it's French for foothills.
It's like
So we're the same. We are in this area is the same geological formation of the Appalachians. It's not as tall yet. So you're saying that the first like proper north-south, like dozens of mile ridge is where your hawk watch is located.
We're looking at the one to the east that's probably about 4 miles away. For us, like thinking about where we're looking, it's like Willow Grove Avenue that goes through Winmore and all that area. So that's what we're looking at, and it's about 4 miles away. And then we're on Militia Hill, which is in Fort Washington State Park. So it's kind of where the Hawkwatch platform is on a bit of a ridgeline.
And what are you doing when you're there at a hawk watch?
So what are we doing? Yeah, so we get there, and a lot of times you're taking a look at what the weather conditions are going to be for a lot of the birds the birds, I believe, make a decision when they're in New Jersey as they're coming down that line, that if either the weather is keeping them to the east, if you have like a northwest wind, and to your point, like broadwings especially are not gonna in some ways they don't appear like they don't want to fight the wind. They're kind of going to go along with
Got
it.
a long way to go, man.
Yeah, and they got a long way to go. They're going to do it all. You know, they're not going to take.
They want to
many
glide
breaks.
as much.
Yes.
They don't want to move their
They're gonna
muscles
yeah.
any more than they have to.
Yeah, they're going to stop a little bit right around sunset in a lot of cases. Then get up the next day as soon as they start getting thermals, and they're going to go as far as they can go. Right. So for us, when we get really big numbers like we did last year, you get a component of some northwest, northeast type of wind
Sure.
that keeps them out.
You're
on
checking the
way.
weather, yeah.
Yeah. So if you have more a northwest and then some north facing winds, it keeps them to the east a bit, and then they'll pass by us. They'll pass by like Ashland and Delaware if the birds are a little bit further east. But I think it cuts off some of the distance. And if they're getting some thermals and they're able to ride, you know, the winds that are up there to take them along, we can do pretty well. So.
But then what do? So you check the weather.
Yeah.
Get to the spot.
Yes.
You-
So we basically man our Hawk Watch from September 1st to November 15th. We have all volunteer Hawk Watch. For the most part, it's 2 shifts. It's 9 to 1 and 1 to 5. We'll have a compiler who's actually the counter. Those other volunteers and other folks who may not be the counter that day, they come up to spot different species. On average, we probably get 9 or 10 species each day.
But you're like sitting there with scopes and
Sitting
like,
there with scopes, binoculars,
Yeah.
umbrellas, all kind of stuff to,
One thing
keep the
I
sun off you.
as a I consider. I mean, I'm a pretty damn good birder. I would say. I mean, I have friends like George Robertson, other people who literally are like professional bird guides that specialize in identifying birds for a living, for clients, whatever. But I'm a damn good birder. And even George and other people who are who lead bird tours or whatever for a living will tip their cap, their tilly cap, or whatever, tip their cap to hawk watchers because
It's highly different. It's
you're
totally
like
different
you're
type of
because
experience.
you're looking at this speck of a
Yeah.
thing in the sky, and and this is a funny thing when you're looking at it, especially if it's a blue sky, like you have this awful or frustrating phenomenon of like you'll see it, you glance away for a second,
You're
and
only
then-
seeing half of the turn, yeah.
and you don't right,
Yeah.
and then also like the little like squigglies that your eye just sort of usually blends into the background all of a sudden
Yeah.
take over when you're trying to find that little speck again.
Yeah.
And then you find it and you're like, I think it's a bird. And then like, but you guys are sitting there be like, definitely broadwing, click,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so that's part of it is like looking at these.
Well, it's I guess it's practice, right?
Yeah.
If you, the more time you spend up there doing it, they all have a little bit. Each one of those species has a tell, I would say.
yeah,
That you can kind of get. Militia Hill is a little bit different, and some of the Ridgeline Hawk Watch guys that we know, they always they kind of make fun of us because they're like, "Why are you looking at the bird in another zip code?" They're like, "The bird will come by if you're on a ridge site. Eventually, it will come to you, right? It'll go over the ridge site."
And it'll be easier to see.
Yes, Militia Hill is a little different because some of these birds are never going to pass over us. They may be.
You've got a view of a bird really far away.
Yeah, they could be
Yeah.
a mile, 2 miles away, possibly.
So
and you're trying to.
you talk about the ridges 4 miles. So Hawk Mountain and Wagner's Gap, these other Big Oven Knob, these other hawk watches are literally on the ridge.
Yes,
And you're saying you're 4 miles from the ridge.
we're on one, but the furthest to the next one to the east, which I consider kind of the last one that we can view,
Oh,
is probably about 4 miles away.
okay. So you are on a ridge, and
Yeah.
some of them come down your ridge.
Yes, yeah.
Have you looked at anywhere on the other ridge you can watch from?
We think about it all the time, but then you're at your site. You know what I mean. So you don't. We anecdotally hear from people in Philadelphia who are by I'm trying to think of the name of the high school there. I don't want to say
Lankenau?
no. Sorry, I'm spacing
Saul?
on this.
What part of the city?
The private high school.
Well, high school in
there's-
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Go for it. Yeah.
So anyway, but I'm thinking
Wait,
about
now I want to know what in what part of Philadelphia? Roxborough, Germantown.
So no. So now you're gonna kill me when I get to like, I don't want to say like not up north from East Falls. I'm trying. What is that called? I haven't been over there in such a long time. I can't think of it.
Well,
one of the friend schools or whatever.
Maybe.
I just want to know because I want to go there.
Well, if you think about anything east of Willow Grove Avenue, when you get through Cheltenham and then you move into Wissahickon, I guess I would think that is
Yeah.
in that area when you get over that way. And then what's if you cross like by Walnut Lane and all that stuff in that area?
Oh,
what's
so
that
there's
area?
Germantown Friends, and there's like Springside.
some of
yeah.
those
Oh,
over that way. Yeah,
interesting because
but we won't see those birds because they're too far east, and they'll make a lot of times we get people anecdotally telling us about a lot of broadwings moving through
And
there.
one of the
I think-
values of what you're doing though is that you are looking in the same place
Yeah.
over time.
Yes.
And so this is how we year to year
Yeah.
build these big long data sets
Yeah.
of sort of species occurrence and so you can sort of build a picture of
Yeah, and there's a
relative abundance.
Militia Hill does put all of its data into something called Hawk Count, which is a function of something called the Hawk Migration Association of North America,
Okay.
which I've been involved with for quite a number of years. And they Hawk Mountain and a few other groups do some statistical study of that. You have to reach some benchmarks in terms of number of years with your count,
Sure.
sticking to protocols, and they do something called Raptor Population Index that does population trending.
Yeah.
Type of research. So, you to your point, you can get some really, really good, robust data sets
Yeah.
that you can look at how certain species of raptors are doing based on where they are in the
Yeah.
country.
And you might not, and like plenty of species, one year the weather conditions might push them one way or another,
Yeah.
or they might have other sort of fluctuations. Who knows why? But when you have how many years that Militia Hill?
This will be 37.
37 years.
I think we're the
You can
fourth oldest
smooth
in
out those
Pennsylvania.
blips and really get a sense of trends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say for us, I don't know that we're Militia Hill. I wouldn't say we may not be a good population barometer, right?
Sure.
Because we're more the highs and lows for us tend to be more definitely weather related, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like over decades, that
Yes.
stuff smooths out,
Yeah.
though. Yeah.
but it can show you when the birds pass through
Yeah.
a certain area where they wouldn't have been caught, right? So like last year in the East, we had the most broadwings in a day, most broadwings in the season, but that was 13 years from the last time it was like that,
Yeah.
so but it does capture the movement, right?
Have
If
you
look
seen
at-
differences in the timing of when species are showing up?
I wouldn't say not really, not for species like the broadwings, because some of the factors then would be East Coast storms that come up, kind of bubble them up a little bit. But if we track when our big day is for broadwings, it's pretty surprising. It's within like 2 or 3 days.
Oh, neat.
It's
Okay.
always maybe from September 15th on. And then, it won't be as late as like the 25th. You'll get young birds because the young birds come after. But, the really, really big movements are usually somewhere from like the 18th to the 23rd.
Okay.
And it's pretty,
Where are the
You're right,
broadwings going?
so I think they're going down to
I think the northern Amazon.
yeah. Mhm.
So most of North America's raptors stay within North America or even within the United States.
We're talking about like also this includes things like red-tailed hawks, which we have here,
Right. So some,
Yeah.
red tails, red shoulders,
or Cooper's hawks. that
Cooper's hawks,
move around.
sharps and nose.
Yeah.
They're not even probably going south of the United States.
Short stopping, right? Some
Right.
of them aren't even that. They're
Right.
maybe sliding.
But they do make up a good, when you're at one of these hawk watches, Hawk Mountain, for instance, because the most famous, like the bulk of the birds you're looking at are birds that are probably not leaving the continent or even the United States. But some ospreys go into, like I said, always. I saw one, in the Amazon, feeding. I think I finished that story where it's saying like, I saw one in Fairbanks and then I saw one literally like fishing in the Amazon.
Yeah.
Right. Peregrines, the tundra peregrines actually winter in like, some of them I think winter literally like on like oil, like platforms in like the Gulf, but all the way into South America. But
the word literally comes from their
wandering,
yeah.
But the peregrines that we see on our buildings and whatnot probably just wander a little bit farther south, or just around. But like, it's funny. A lot of people don't realize this, but like, for birds that have like really big geographic ranges that have a migratory component, it's funny. I'm talking to people who probably already know this, but I realize we're talking to people in the podcast around the world who don't know this. But it's like a lot of times birds that are farther north, that breed farther north, actually travel farther south, because the thought is that the birds like in between are able to just shift a few hundred miles south. And so the birds coming from much farther north, the wintering territories are already taken. So they have to go even further. Right. So, but also our peregrines around here are like a chimera of, because they were made up of all different subspecies of peregrine falcon from around the world
when they were reintroduced.
Right. So a lot of people, even me sometimes, will be critical or like get a little like, ooh, about falconry. You're like, why you like these birds that can like, it's funny. I have I think now 7 aquariums in the basement. Cause I got in aquariums recently. But, and these fish, aren't able to,
Swim free.
right. But so who am I to criticize falconers? But in my mind, I romanticize these birds that I love to see that I know for a fact travel thousands of miles in a year or whatever, and they're now captive. But if it wasn't for falconers, we wouldn't have peregrine falcons in the East anymore because
that's what we used to reintroduce them. Yeah.
Right. And so made up. But anyway, back to what we're talking about. So it's another thing about I want to talk about. I remember one of you guys telling me that you thought besides the fact that you're on one ridge and you can see another ridge, and they're using like a less pronounced, like the Hawk Mountain, and the Hawk Watch is on the first proper mountain ridge, 1,000 feet of rise, whatever, at least. You have these smaller ridges in the Piedmont offer similar conditions, so you get less amount of birds other than the broadwings, which aren't as tied to the ridges. But I remember you guys telling me once that you also think, so where you are in suburban Philadelphia area. And like we said before, it's not like it goes from like city to rural. Like, no, you guys it's still very urban. It's the same kind of density as like Los Angeles or Milwaukee, whatever.
Cincinnati. Yeah.
Right. But, right near, so most of the people in the Philadelphia area, like more than half, live technically outside Philadelphia in these suburban communities, and not far from, and your Hawk Watch is right near the 2 major highways. And there's literally a small town called Conshohocken that like, was, a Schuylkill River town, but like, but now like, it's like basically has boomed because 2 highways meet, and there's all these like office parks and like apartments for the people who live.
Driving me nuts.
Right.
They're building into the floodplain in a really dangerous way, but we'll put that aside.
Right. So isn't there some thought that these big high
generate the heat that they want to rise on?
Right. The asphalt,
the heat island effect is helping them along in the migration.
Well, specifically, like these large highways, the asphalt heats up. So tell me, so you also think that some of these birds are riding thermals that are generated from the highways?
It's possible, right? Because you would think you would get that rise. I mean, from what I understand, right, these birds can see these thermals, or they sense them in some way.
Yeah,
so that they're able to, when they're hitting the nadir, I guess, not the apex of whatever the ride down,
right?
That whoever finds the next thermal, that's what attracts all the rest of them, because they can
they can see forever.
Yeah. And then they're just bouncing from thermal to thermal to thermal. So it probably, when they do, the way I've always kind of thought about it is the ridges give them, if there's some kind of breeze, the ridges give them a guaranteed lift, right? And so no matter what direction the wind might be coming from, you're going to get some lift off a ridge. Whereas if you get out by us, where it's a little bit, we'll say flatter, right? They're probably not getting as strong a thermal off whatever height we're at. If the thermals can be enhanced in some way, then they'll come with it. And you see the broadwings are fine in the thermals, but you get a lot of other species mixed in with these kettles because they're using.
Well, he's not used another term of art. What's a kettle?
Oh, so a kettle. Okay. So, if you think about how water boils in a teapot, you get
Yeah.
the spinning bubbles and they
Yeah, yeah.
bubble up. So the way that broadwings and birds will use the thermals is they'll get to the bottom, the thermals start lifting them, and they fly in a circular pattern. They're not flying; they're actually kind of just riding it. You know, they tend not to be flapping. They're putting themselves in such an aerodynamic way
Yeah.
that it will lift them, right?
Soaring, shall we say?
Soaring is a good way to say that. Yeah. And they're doing it in a circular motion, and then they all get to the top,
Yeah.
you know, as they get to the top, and then they stream out of the top to on an angle until they get to the next one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And we-
sometimes
And
you'll
it can
get,
be awesome to see with this like
if you get hundreds and
almost like
thousands
a
of
cloud
birds,
of birds.
a swirling mass of birds
Yeah, yeah.
is pretty cool.
The
It is.
most broadwings I ever saw, the biggest kettle I ever saw was, I don't remember exactly when. It's a memory of, I don't know if I was going out, what I was doing, but I have a memory of being on the turnpike, and when I was a little kid, and looking up and just seeing thousands of hawk.
A mass, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I had a similar experience. I once texted you, I think, and they might have just been something like crows. I don't know, but I got all excited because I saw this like kettle of birds off 78, I think.
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, so we know Billy is super, you know, as hopefully follows our podcast, and we were podcasting was cool. We're over 10 years of this podcast. But it's funny now that I'm almost like ashamed to tell people how to do a podcast. They're like, of course you do podcasts. Like, motherfucker, we did a podcast 10, like 11, 12 years ago before anybody did podcasts before. But anyway, Billy, you know, he's a well-rounded naturalist. But his true love is herps, snakes.
Yeah.
And there's a whole phenomenon called road cruising.
Yep.
And so roads, the asphalt heats up and retains its heat into the evening when it cools down, and so snakes will come to warm up on the road. And just like we're talking about, like these roads, capture heat, and so it stands to reason that hot air rises, and so these birds are getting riding thermals from highways, as well.
Oh yeah, makes perfect perfect.
But is there
That's your point, right? The they don't have to use energy, right?
Yeah.
The whole goal for some of these species is to use as little energy to
You
make
have to fly like 4,000 miles.
Yes.
You want to do it
Yeah,
efficiently.
and if you're doing it in 10 days or
Yeah.
2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever,
Yeah.
I think there are some species of raptors that actually kind of like break along the way, may actually kind of eat.
Either way,
those kind of
you
things.
wanna
But
do it
broadwings are
efficiently,
more
yeah.
trying to get to where they're going.
Broadwings,
A buteo.
and then
So,
so they're probably what, a third the mass of a red-tailed hawk.
Yeah, it's a pretty good guess. Yeah.
And they so they're interesting birds because most buteos are more open country birds.
so buteo is a genus
A
of
genus of
hawk.
hawks.
Yeah.
So the red-tailed hawk, the kia, that
Yeah, the
classic
one we'd be
scream,
most familiar with and
and
year-round,
usually
Yeah.
they use the red-tailed hawk's call for bald eagles.
in TV commercials.
Yeah,
it's
so
like-
bald eagles make almost like a cackling laugh. I think it's a beautiful sound. I don't think it's
but
wimpy,
it's not majestic.
but the classic
staccato, right?
the classic like
I like the giggly
eagle noise that you've heard is actually a red-tailed hawk, which is
Yeah.
one of the best bird noises in the world.
Yeah.
It's a red-tailed hawk. Also the buzzard, the common buzzard. So in Europe they call buteos buzzards.
Right.
Here we call vultures
Vultures
buzzards,
buzzards.
all things. But
Yeah.
in Europe it would be red-tailed buzzard, right? So their common buzzard makes a very similar call to ours, but I think ours is even more. So red-tailed hawk is and I think red-tailed hawks, there's probably more of them now than there ever were, because they're more of an open country species. So like in the east, which is heavily forested, I think there's more red-tails out here at least.
Yeah,
But the
they're like your default hawk if you're around.
the broadwing hawk, which again is about a third the mass, probably half the wingspan, but a third the mass, like crow-sized.
Yeah, that's
about
right. Yeah.
They are a deciduous forest,
Forest nester, yeah.
and they deciduous and mixed forest.
Kind of a whistle call.
They have a whistle, picky, and they I think they're
kind of piercing. Yeah.
I think they
Yeah, first time I heard that.
and
I was
they're
hiking
so
around
most
downs.
buteos are
Yeah.
hunt from like soaring and ambushing almost from the air. I mean, do ambush from perches, but broadwings are far. Most buteos like more open areas, whatever. Or if you do like open areas, they're like short-tailed hawks that hunt birds in the canopy from above. But brawling hawks, I think they eat a whole lot of chipmunks.
Yeah.
And I think they even eat like salamanders and stuff too. They're like so they're a forest species.
Kind
And-
of like red shoulders in that respect there.
Right, yeah. And you'd be surprised if you ever been to the if you ever been to the Amazon or like specifically like the more like hilly where the South America where it gets more like hilly in the Amazon and like the rainforest gets kind of like more topography. If you ever been to a true rainforest and you've ever been to like the Eastern Deciduous Forest in the summer, there's similarities. You could really see how birds feel at home one to the other. The difference is, just way more vines and bromeliads and, epiphytes in the tropics. But
Yeah.
I mean,
You got leaves, you got tree trunks.
but it's
all
still,
the canopy.
it's pretty simple. You can see how these birds feel quite at home.
Yeah.
But brawling hawks are them, and I guess Mississippi kites are the most migratory.
What about those ones out west?
Swainsons. Swainsons are Swainsons go all the way to the Pampas again.
Yeah.
Mississippi kites kind of the Pampas too, but the brawlings go to the Amazon.
And rough wing, is that another one?
Rough leg.
Rough leg.
Flags.
They are Arctic, subarctic to like to like North Dakota,
Got
Yeah.
it.
a little bit to here. They're they're kind of like the rough leg hawks are more or less like the hawk counterpart to snowy owls.
Okay, got it.
Good description.
Just like how short eared owls are like the owl counterpart. Harriers are the northern harriers are the short eared owl counterpart. And I would say
Red tail and
red-tailed hawk and great horned owl are counterparts, and then red-shouldered hawk and barred owls are
Okay.
counterparts. I would say, although I don't know what would the Swainson's hawk be, like burrowing owl. I don't know, probably nearly not.
Well,
But-
but like you have a lot of this partition, like you sort of have the night shift and day shift in a lot of animals. I mean, I think of that with whenever I do a bat night, and you've got like your chimney swifts, and then it's like someone blew a whistle,
Yeah.
they're gone,
Yeah.
and here are the bats.
Yeah.
doing the same thing.
Yeah. And Swainson's hawk are more they're a grassland species, so but they're interesting because they migrate down to the Pampas. But one of the things I've always frustrated me about Militia Hill Hawkwatch is the only list I really care about, bird list, is my Philadelphia list. And Militia Hill is what,
outside. It's
Is
for Washington.
a mile,
Yeah, probably. Well, maybe a couple.
2 miles.
Depending on how you where you go. Yeah.
I mean, it is just over the Philadelphia line.
Tantalizingly close.
Right. And again, most people who say the Philadelphians aren't actually Philadelphians, and they live in the suburbs and
Oh,
they're
yeah,
not
yeah,
actually
yeah,
in the
yeah.
city.
Yeah.
We have 1.6 million people in Philadelphia in the city, but we have depends on how you count our region, 4 to 6 million.
Yeah.
The problem with the Philadelphia metropolitan area is,
We include Wilmington. And
well,
stuff.
we're so dense in the Northeast that we get really close to we overlap with New York's suburbs and we overlap with DC's and Baltimore suburbs.
Sure.
So, but anyway, you're right outside. So, I mean, I think there's more people in your county
So it drives
Montgomery-
nuts. You can't count that for your list.
So I can't count Militia Hill for my Philadelphia list. So I always try to find, and it seems, although you just told me, I always thought that the Militia Hill birds would go over Roxborough, but you're saying that potentially they might go over the Germantown and Monterey.
some of them do. If they're,
So- So I'm now thinking of going to Bluebell Hill or somewhere in Germany. So I'm always trying to find the hawk watching spot in Philadelphia. And one year, it's a little bit controversial, not very, it's just dumb birder nonsense. But my super good buddy Dan Efferson, who is I think battling with complications from long-term Lyme disease, hopefully, because if it's not Lyme disease, it's probably
Yeah, but he hasn't been well.
It was-
Yeah.
he's one of my best friends, and I love him to death, and he's been really, me and Dan would go birding together all the time, and we were another Philadelphia resident, and we're trying to find the Philadelphia hawk watching spot. So one day it was good wind, and we're going to different spots. I think we went to Belmont, And then we
Oh.
also went to like the
I just
indoor
thought of school, Penn Charter.
Penn Charter. Okay, that makes sense.
That's where a lot of the bird. That's where I've always anecdotally heard.
That's in Germantown. Okay, so anyway, so we were looking for hawk watching spots mostly in Northwest Philly because it's closest to Militia Hill. And eventually we ended up at this place called Minnetonka Farm, right on the edge of Philly, overlooking the Schuylkill. So we kind of have a ridge between, by default, because we have the valley down to the Wissahickon Creek, and then creek, it was in Philly, and down the Schuylkill River. So really, maybe they'll come down this. And Manitowoc Farm is right there, and it's crazy because we're trying to find a hawk watching spot, and we're there, and Dan is notoriously conservative as a birder. Literally, like, I've been with him. I'm a bit more experienced. He's a little bit older than me, but I'm a much more experienced birder. He was much more plant guy, got into birds. And I've been places with him where, like, no exaggeration, where he doesn't have common red pole as a lifer yet. And I said plenty of other times.
That's not what.
Common red pole.
Okay.
And a
It's
flock
like
of
little finch.
a flock, the flock
It
of
comes down
goldfinches
from the north.
a flock of goldfinches with a couple red poles land in like some goldenrod and mullen, whatever, in this field in like New Jersey. And he's like, I didn't see it good enough to count. I'm like, are you kidding me? That was a red pole. So we're in like Texas, and we're nowhere near where scaled quail are, or Montezuma quail for that matter. We're only where the only quail is Bob White. We haven't gotten to like the arid part yet. We're like driving south of Houston or whatever, and a covey of Bob White erupt from the, and he's like, I didn't see one off. I was like, dude, the only quails here is Bob White. And then we're at McGee Marsh, the biggest week American bird in the whole Warburg thing, in Ohio. And there's a Bob White walking around the parking lot, and he's like, it's probably because Bob White are a bird people hunt, and people do release.
It was released.
It's probably. I'm like, Dan, what's gonna take count a Bob White? I mean, luckily, I mean, even though like I'm younger than Dan, I was birding young enough where like Bob White were more common. I have seen absolutely 100% wild Bob White, but I'm like, God, you drive me crazy. So anyway, like, so we see this raptor, we see this hawk, we see a buteo fly over, and I'm like, man, that buteo sure has pretty long, narrow wings for a buteo. They're kind of like you might describe it as shaped like the flame of a candle, right? Like, I'm like, wow, this buteo really, is really graceful and has these beautifully shaped wings. I'm like, it's clearly an immature Swainson's hawk. And to me, and we have like a chatter group or whatever, and like, if Dan wasn't there, I would have been like, I got a Swainson's hawk. But because Dan's there, he's like, I don't know. But like, dude, Dan, it's this man. So we post like on chatter, like, hey, we have I describe it without saying what it is. And, but it's near the end of the day. So, I think it's probably like 4:00 ish, and it's like October or whatever, maybe late October. And I'm like, I think that was Swainson's hawk. If you weren't here, and I would have just said it was Swainson's hawk, but whatever. And immature, so it didn't have like the super bold field marks, but I'm like, it was Swainson's hawk. And what do you know, like, you mentioned Ashland Hawk Watch earlier.
They posted that
I was like, let's check Ashland. The next day they post a photo of the same bird.
Well, did he take it then? Did he accept it then?
Well, here's the controversy: is that, and someone asked me, someone I know, I'm not going to name names because she's a wonderful human being, good friend of mine, but I'm just saying she's acting on like, I'm just saying like she's doing anything wrong.
What'd you say? Yeah,
she's like, hey, will you write a report for Pennsylvania Ornithological Record Committee? I was asked to do this. So I did. I wrote a report. And I'd mentioned, I think I even have a link because I wrote the guy, Dave, I ended up friending him on Facebook, whatever, at the counter. I was, can I use your photo? I was like, I was like, the same bird we saw was seen in Ashland. And they accepted the record. Right? But like, Matt Haley, great, one of my best friends, great people. So other people of mine were like, you didn't have a photo. Like Holger, other people were like, you didn't have a photo. That bird should not have been accepted. That shouldn't count. So I'm like, dude, I was asked. And by the way, before everybody had cell phones and everybody had digital cameras,
Oh my goodness.
I think it's funny. But the people were like, before all this, like people used to get birds accepted on records. And I was asked also, conversely, same person, great friend of mine, was like, did you saw a the Ashford flycatcher in Tacony? I was like, yeah. She's like, could you write a report? I was like, I can. I was like, the problem is like it's a Mayorkas flycatcher and there's many that look very similar. And I'm like, I don't have a photo, and it was a bird many other people saw. And she asked me to write a report. I was like, I'll write a report, but the problem is that like, could I rule out some extreme vagrant South American species? No. Like I can't conclusively say this was Ashford versus like one of these.
Yeah. And for those who aren't familiar, flycatchers are notoriously difficult to distinguish from each other. And like it is for someone who's a marginal birder, marginal with respect to the community in a way, it is amusing to see people squabble over the finer points of flycatcher ID.
Right, but it was clearly a Mayorkas flycatcher of this genus, and our Mayorkas flycatcher, Great Case flycatcher, should all be so. The East Coast, the east of the United States, is much harsher, much more pronounced.
Yeah,
winter and summer than the West Coast. The West Coast is much milder. So the East Coast birds get the hell out of here because most likely it's going to be completely no food. If you're an insect eater, there's going to be no insects. Get the hell out of here. West Coast birds have a much more leisurely migration because it's much more mild. They don't have to worry as much.
Yeah.
So we get in the winds in the United States.
So signs pointed to being a vagrant western.
Well, the winds, the prevailing winds, the jet stream go west to east. So the east gets a fair amount of West Coast vagrants, specifically in November, because that's when they migrate. They migrate later, and the prevailing winds blow them east. So like, literally, like hummingbirds, like our ruby-throated hummingbird, they're all gone.
Yeah.
By mid-October.
Yeah.
If you see a hummingbird in late October, November, it's almost certainly, even though we have millions of ruby-throated hummingbirds here, they're all gone. And if you see a hummingbird in November, it's certainly a West Coast hummingbird.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing here. This should certainly be an Ashford flycatcher is extremely common throughout the western parts. It's like ubiquitous. So almost certainly it's Ashford. And they look, Ashford and Great Catcher are very different looking, even though they're the same genus. But there are other species in the Southwest, in the Central South America, that look quite similar to Ashford. That it could be, but
I think we ran into the same thing at the Hawkwatch. We've had magnificent. Well, I'll say magnificent frigate bird, but because you can't rule out the other frigate birds, it just goes down as frigate bird species.
I love it because people who are into like me, we don't have these problems. I mean, like there's no question of having a vagrant snake.
They can't get as far as a field, right? Yeah,
like you occasionally have the released pet. We're actually just texting with a friend group about probably would release turtle, but like, but it's the question like with birds, and I guess any kind of flying insect, you have this problem too. A lot of plants that have windborne seeds, maybe, but like that when you're dealing with species that don't move much, can't cover much ground, geography really is a definitive criterion, at where, like, in terms of identification. Like if I find, and this, I get frustrated with iNaturalist. I think when birders start IDing things using AI on iNaturalist, which I love, iNaturalist, not criticizing iNaturalist, but they'll see a turtle, like, oh, it might be a river cooter based on the ambiguous identification. And I'm like, there's no native river cooters anywhere near us. We're states away from river cooters.
Yeah.
It's not a river cooter. And like the birder impulse is to be like,
it could be anything.
Well, it could be anything. I'm like, honest to God, unless someone left that as a pet, I'm telling you, it doesn't look like a river cooter to me. Like, there's no way that's a river cooter. Yeah. And that's sort of like it's sort of a very different way of looking at geography when you're identifying something.
It's funny when you go to the tropics, because, there are, obviously, we have birds that migrate to the tropics. And there are actually some birds that actually will also migrate, that migrate from the temperate part of South America to tropical South America. But most tropical birds don't migrate; they're resident, and they are and this is specifically South America for most taxa of the world, plants, frogs, little birds. It is the biodiversity hotspot of the world. Because you have two things. You have the Amazon, which is split up between all these really wide rivers where species can't cross. So there's diversity there. And then you have the foothills, and then the tropical Andes and mountains because of the changes in altitude. And then the difference in the valleys in between mountain ranges, the valleys themselves is just, and tropics, heat and then moisture. It is the
Also, you have just with rainforests, you have sort of like within
strata
within the rainforest.
So you have every possible factor to facilitate speciation occurring in the tropical in South America. It is the biodiversity hotspot of the world for many things. And within the tropics, we have so many species. They can get very specific. So guides there will be like when you have like specific flycatchers that are so many of them and they look very similar. They'll just be like, how do you know is this and not that? They're like, because we're at
this side of the Orinoco, it is this.
Right. But they're also like, we're at this altitude and it is this habitat. There's nothing, it cannot be these other species. And we're used to being like, yeah, well, a willow flycatcher prefers to be in like wet, scrubby stuff. Like little shrubs and like short trees, but if it's migrating, it could be in a forest, right? Or can it, and at least, so we're like, but they're like, no, it is only this. And, it is this difference.
So it's a blessing and a curse in some
right.
Yeah.
So let's
get back to Swainson's Hawks. I've had some really good experiences at Militia Hill with them.
Let's talk about those, but then maybe let's wrap up after that.
Well, no, and yes, we should briefly at least talk about Wild Birds Unlimited.
Okay.
We'll do Swainson Hawks.
Swainson's Hawks. I've seen two immature. Last year we had a really good one go right over the deck. And a few years ago we had one, it was funny. I was sitting there with my wife, Marlene, and we had been out west that year and maybe even seen, hundreds, if not more, Swainson's Hawks, but then you come back east.
These are like cute little hawks that eat grasshoppers.
Yes.
I mean, they're still pretty big. They're like red shoulder hawk size.
To the red tail, but they have some really distinct features about them. Like the tapering of the wing. There's some real distinct features about them.
They're a particularly beautiful bird of a particularly beautiful group of birds.
Yeah.
They're
very, I want to say like a refined shape to them,
Okay.
Yeah.
So
very elegant.
Yeah.
Of a group of birds is already considered,
pretty damn,
people would like to use, was it like majestic to refer to red-tailed hawks and red shoulder. And so they're like more elegant than majestic, but still pretty damn majestic.
Yeah. Cool birds. Go for it. Yeah.
But to the point you were making, like I tend to be really conservative in my ID. I don't tend to. I'm getting better at the fact that with more people watching birds and more people looking for birds and things, you are going to see more vagrant type of behavior with birds and with storms.
But again, this is a western bird. The prevailing winds are they're fairly numerous.
Yeah,
and they're annual, and the prevailing winds bring them out east.
Yeah,
So it's not.
So we've seen them at Militia Hill, but it's so funny, like, especially when you get them really close. Like we've had ones that come up right over the deck. And the one I'm thinking about, my wife, she's looking at me, she's like, what's the problem? And I'm like, did you see that bird? She's like, yes. So she's like, what would you call it? I'm like, oh, I don't want to say it. Right. And she's like, why not? And I was like, well, this is what I think it was. She's like, of course it was, because we just saw so many of these. Like, what was the holdup? The whole holdup was geography for me. I'm like, I'm back east. That's like my brain will not allow me to think that.
I was on the hawk watch at Cape May when the zone tail.
Yeah,
it was the first record for New Jersey, and I'm there with Tom Reed and I'm not religious, but God bless his soul, Tom Johnson. What a horrible loss.
Yeah,
one of the greatest naturalists and birders, and he died at 35. An incredible person, Pennsylvania, moved to New Jersey. But yeah, I was there with and also John Feenstra, who moved out west, but he's a bird guide from New Jersey. I was there on Hawk Watch with Tom. I think the counter is Tom Reed. Tom Johnson happens to be there, and then John Feenstra happens to be visiting. He was renowned bird guy, whatever. And we're like, this is a pretty funny story too, because I was there with a group of student workers from my program, so like Taiki and Tavon and these guys, and we're there and we see this dark raptor, and we're like, I guess closer, and someone's like, I forget who said it, was like, get on this raptor. This is dark, and it's a zone-tail. It's clearly a zone-tailed hawk. We should be no closer than West Texas, and we're just like, but I think one earlier was seen in like Nova Scotia, or it was kind of, I guess it has to come back down. And so finally someone was like, that's a zone-tail. The funny thing was the younger people, the high school program that I brought there, they were down below the Hawk Watch observing a demonstration where there's a banding station nearby. They brought birds and they're showing people these birds. And so I go there and I'm like, guys, get on the Hawk Watch. It's a zone-tail hawk. And then I realized, I'm like, well, the hawk, obviously this person, the person giving the demonstration probably herself wants to see this, and the other people who are not part of my group would love to see zone-tailed, but they're in the middle of this presentation, and I'm like, what do I do? And I walk up and interrupt this person mid-presentation, and she looks at me like, what the hell she gives me this look of like, are you out of your goddamn mind? And I'm like, I'm sorry, there's a zone-tailed hawk. And then like I go up, and then like after everything, she walks up to me and she's like, you can interrupt my program anytime you want.
For something like that, yeah. No doubt. There's some things just
yeah. And that's the thing about it's always his chance of vagrants or whatever. And plus yours. Once in a while, person limit, real quick. I had heard that nearby to your Hawk Watch was sometimes an alternate location. Tell me, is it true that the rooftop dining area of the Whole Foods in Plymouth Meeting Mall?
I don't know that ever came to pass.
But I had heard that some people go there and solve.
Yeah, I would be the same. Like you always, again, we get reports of where broadwings would be. You know, you had 1 or 2 miles an hour to the wind, and they could be.
I think the person that told me has a reputation for. I'm not gonna name names, but you had a regular visitor to Hawk Watch set, who, by all accounts, had a legitimately remarkable life.
Yeah,
but also embellished some aspects.
There's plenty of birders that do, you know.
Right, but this person had told me that he would go there and get just as good birds as your Hawk Watch. But I guess it's not true then. Okay.
Oh, it could be true.
Right.
There would be no way to know that it's not true. I'm not.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't think it ever turned into a spot that anybody was regularly monitoring. Right. So I guess you can always find them anywhere. There's so many times I get texts from people talking about how many broadwings they're seeing.
Right.
And I'm sitting in Militia Hill going, twiddling my thumbs, going, yeah, the sky is blue.
Yeah.
The sky is still blue. The sky is empty. So,
right.
The best part of these birds is they're doing what they're doing, and you're lucky enough sometimes for them to pass over you.
But I know from the frustration of being a Philadelphian I literally work in a place that effectively is a ridge, because my meadow for my facility is directly at the apex of the where there's between the valley of the Wazick and the valley of the
and what 5 minutes from Militia Hill,
right?
In the air?
Literally, like if that. And then also nearby where I work is an area of radio towers, because it's one of the highest points in Philadelphia. I said, but radio towers, and so and I've gone to those places as the correct winds. Yeah, I got to Slayton Talk one day, I saw some other birds, but nothing compared to when I go to Mission Hill. So you absolutely, it's not just you have a lot of open sky. You really legitimately do have more birds than any other.
Yeah, there's some confluence of
right.
factors that really.
Yeah, and it's remarkable. And again, this is in the middle of the Philadelphia metropolitan area, very dense.
I'll just get in real quick. Last year, best year ever in the history of Militia Hill, made it over 40,000 birds for the season, and 37,355 of those were broadwings. Broadwings are always going to be the bulk of our numbers,
right?
But we had 2 days with the best day ever that we've ever had of 22,000 plus, and then followed up with 8,000. So we had 30,000 broadwings.
Literally, how are you counting that?
So that is pretty cool. So when you have folks that have been there for a long time, you count you count them as they count,
Yeah.
right? And you're counting in tens. The same kind of thing with any kind of counting of
You're
water,
eyeballing. That's about
Your
10 right there. That's 10 right there. It's
right? And then you can kind of figure out what grouping you're going to do.
Sure.
And then you try to get that. The thing I love about Browings, or the thing that I love about with the Radiant thermals, is they stream out of the top. So then it's almost like you can check your work, right? So you have an idea of what you think that kettle is.
Right.
It's going to stream. And, on these really, really heavy, heavy days, that line across could be 10, 20, 30 birds across. And then it's streaming, right? So then you can kind of count the lines. I want to say it that way. And I'm always fascinated at how close the two counts are that you do in your own head.
Good.
Right.
All right.
So
You have to close.
yeah, well, yeah, because there's got to be some play with that because it's subjective, right? But if you have three
But
or
also,
four
if you have
people,
multiple eyes on it,
Yes.
then
And
everybody's checking. Yeah.
if you get within, you're talking about a kettle of 1,000 birds, and folks are within like 20 or 50 birds.
You're pretty good.
Like
yeah.
that's pretty good. When you go across, how many did you see? How many did you see? How many did you see?
Yeah.
I'm always impressed that the variance isn't that big.
Good.
And that helps you feel like what you're doing is useful, because there's not a wild variance in that.
Cool.
But that's mainly, and a lot of times they'll rekettle. So as they're doing that bouncing on the thermals,
Sure.
and you're able sometimes, if you're lucky, to get 2 or 3 chances at a single kettle to try to get the number.
Got it.
Cool. The other thing too that's pretty cool about this is when they're at different levels, like different altitudes. I would say, like, you may be looking at one group that's coming to the base of a kettle, a base of a thermal, and they're going to rekettle.
Sure.
But there could be other ones that are still just streaming. They caught some wind up higher, so you get like this weird 3D effect where you have some that are kettling, some that are falling, and then you have others that are just streaming straight over you. So yeah. So it when there's really, really large numbers, it's quite a sight to see.
Awesome. Yeah.
Last thing I want to tell you about Browings, and I know we want to kind of one of the funny things about Browings at the end of the day is when they decide they're done for the day, they basically just close up and come straight down. They tend to like to be in, like if they see pines. I think one of the things that actually benefits us too, Fort Washington State Park is 500 acres in a pretty suburban to urban area as you come in. And I think for them too, they can see that green space type of thing.
Yeah.
And, but when they decide they're done, so you could have multiple groups of birds, or you could have 50, 100 birds. They just stop and drop. They come straight down, and then they go into the whatever tree or forest that you can get multiple and deciduous trees, and it is just something to see when they decide that this is it. Like we'll get back up tomorrow morning, and then they rise up. It's pretty damn cool.
And it's so frustrating that my 2,000 acre park, a mile, maybe 2 miles south of your park, doesn't get those birds.
Are you sure they're not hanging out in there?
I mean, maybe we see them fly over, but like,
Yeah.
but not like,
People don't hike at night.
Yeah.
but I mean, I've seen Browings over my plate, but not like that. The most Browings I've ever seen was from like the Roxborough Reservoir, and I swear they're coming up for the Scuba Center, and I'm like, I mean, maybe they're coming up with Wasagan. It might be just
The funny thing at the end of the day too. So most of these birds, when they're migrating, they're tracking the sun setting, right? Because they're gonna, as you get later in the day, you can watch the angle that these birds come over Militia Hill change. So if these birds are usually the birds we get latest in the day are to our east, and they're coming almost east-west as opposed to coming from the northeast and southwest. So we're basically turning the way we're looking at the end of the day. And they're coming a little bit behind us, but they're coming east-west because they're tracking directly to the sun.
Okay.
It's pretty wild to see that, because you'll get some Browings later in the day. And then
The light must be great.
the light's great. They're flapping a little bit more because there's not it is getting a little bit cooler.
Sure.
And they're just trying to, I've always figured, like with some of these birds, as long as they can keep seeing the sun,
Yeah.
that's where they're going to keep trying to get a little bit further.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. I would recommend hawk watching is a whole different thing from birding,
Yeah.
but it has its real
well,
beauty to it.
it's funny to speak to that. Like, I've been at like Hawk Mountain, and there's I actually prefer Wagner's Gap, which is like a little bit west and a little bit south, but it's less famous. The Hawk Mountain, it's great to go there. It is a good experience, but also it's a really important Rosalie Edge. People were killing
Starting
hawks
the
there.
whole- yeah.
It's a wonderful cultural thing. And it's great. What they do, also the research, everything about Hawk Watch is Hawk Mountain's wonderful. One thing they do is they have interns all over the world.
Great program. Yeah.
And so, like, I'll be there sometimes. I'll be chatting them up, and I'll be like, "Oh, like," and I'm like, "Oh, where else have you gone or whatever?" And like, literally, like, almost all of them have no interest in birding other than hawk watching. Like, I think one was like,
Its own discipline, yeah.
I think one was like interested that like I was talking about like, oh, you haven't been to Jersey? You haven't gone to Barnegat Light? You haven't gone to any of these places? And I'm like, oh, and I think I happened to mention that like the Jersey salt marshes could be good for rough-legged hawk, which is rough-legged hawk does not generally come down the mountain ridges, so it's so they were interested in seeing that. Other than that, they were like no interest. I was like, wow, that's crazy. I mean, you bird in general, not just hawk watching, but a lot of hawk watch people had no interest in birds other than hawks.
Hawk
It's great.
watching for me is the most joy. I do
Yeah.
feel the other birding is wonderful, but the there's something tied to the migration that captures my imagination.
Yeah.
I hear you.
That you know that how far some of these birds are going, and they're doing it twice a year, right? They're coming back.
True.
They're racing back to get to a breeding ground. If they have a great breeding season, then they're at it again. Like I always laugh when we have down years and we don't get a lot of burrowings. I always think it's because the adults didn't show them the way past Militia Hill.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, you spin all kind of scenarios that have nothing to do with reality, but it's just kind of funny when you're like, none of the young birds know where we are.
Well, the funny thing is we spent, I don't know how long, at least over an hour, maybe an hour and a half, talking about what you do as a volunteer. You don't get paid for it, right? You don't get any paid for
No,
it.
we're
But if someone wants a place they can talk to you and buy birds,
Right. So
Yeah.
your job, your profession, what pays your bills
Last
and your
years,
your
yeah.
wife's bills,
Yes, yeah.
your whole household's bills.
My wife is still a pharmacist.
Oh, she's still a pharmacist.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
sorry. But like you get paid, you also work professionally
Yes.
in
Now,
the birding
Yeah.
culture
Yeah.
as a co-owner of a Wild
Wild
Birds
Birds
Unlimited.
Unlimited, which is backyard bird feeding. Now I got to tell you, many of my customers don't find hawks to be all that. They're not. Hawks aren't very popular because they're taking the passerines off the feeders.
They're
You know-
there for the red poles.
Sure. I always try to gently say, you're feeding up the chain. You know what I mean? But
Which is funny.
for a
We-
lot of parts,
Yeah, the other day,
Yeah, at
my wife
Cooper's
was,
Hawk Park
it's,
on the
it's so funny how
fence,
you
yeah.
talk about this. We found a bunch of blue jay feathers in the backyard,
Yeah.
and we do have a neighbor that has a house cat that wanders, and named Betty and Angie, and they're the loveliest people. But what are you gonna do? Anyway, my wife's like really nervous. She's like, "I think this maybe Betty got it. It's cat," and I was like, "Babe, this to me, I think this is Cooper's dog." It's funny. What went from being like, "Oh no, a cat got a blue jay," to be like, they're like, hell yeah, Cooper's Hawk got a blue jay. I love feeding birds.
Yeah.
And I love
No, the
coming
biggest joy for me, Tony, is just what I find is, so I've been bird watching and, being really interested in listing, all these things that I've been doing for my whole life, working with folks who are genuinely getting joy out of feeding birds in their backyard and knowing every species, all those things isn't always that important. It's just the joy of having them in proximity that they're getting from that is pretty cool. And I just love working with the folks that come in, and I'm so thankful for the people that come in into the store because, it's been there 31 years. So it was really, really set up really well by the previous owners. And then, like I said, my wife and I have had it for 6 years now. So it's just been a really, really nice experience. But like I said, sometimes I got to keep the hawk love on the down low, right? Because, they may not be the most popular birds.
but like you can do, but it's, it's funny. It's like when I worked in Alaska, and actually when I worked in Arctic, like, I worked in a duck camp, I worked in a goose camp, and like the people who were studying those, the main people, they were duck hunters and goose hunters, and they loved those. Duck hunters love ducks more than birders and goose hunters. And so you can love things that you kill, and also you can love things that kill other things that you love, and like, so it's all good.
It's
it's meant to be that way, right?
Like I keep aquariums now. I love
they're predators.
snails are good, but I I have 3 dwarf puffers, pea puffers that eat snails, and I like snails. Snails are good for aquarium, but when I get too many snails, I chuck the little ones into the to the pea puffers. But wild birds limit. So why would you why did you, rather than start from scratch a store that sold bird seed and bird feeders, why would you get involved with a franchise?
Oh, sure.
Let's talk about that.
A great franchise system, great support from the. It's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it like a corporate office, but it is a franchise support center. Is what the gentleman that started the whole chain, Jim Carpenter. That's where they have the franchise support center out in Indiana, and just that support. Like Marlene and I had no history in business, so being able to find a franchise that gave you a lot of support in what you're doing, the branded merchandise, there's this, there's a similarity, not a similarity, but it's the same seed pretty much. They're proprietary blends. That's what I want to say. So having that all set up was great. We took over an existing store, which was really good because when we did it at the point in life, right? I don't know if I would have had the hustle to build up a customer base, all those kind of things. So I think
Where is it?
It's in Dresher, Pennsylvania, and it's just it's turned out to be quite a wonderful opportunity. So we're very happy about that. And the folks that come in,
What's funny is you actually live in Philadelphia, though.
we do, yeah.
Yeah.
Marlene is born and bred. She's lived in the same house that she grew up in.
She's from
I'm an interloper
close to
from
where I'm
North
from, but
Jersey,
not
yeah.
quite. Yeah, you're like Fox Chase, right?
Castor Gardens.
Oh, Castor Gardens,
It's
okay.
called, yeah.
Phil is really like pedantic about our neighborhoods.
Yeah. So I'm like I said, I'm a transplant from North Jersey. So, but it's a great opportunity. People really enjoy doing it.
And there's no
I
wild birds
love working-
limited within city limits, are there?
There are not, no.
So I know there's one in Ardmore, right, or Havertown, right?
Havertown, yeah. There's Collegeville,
Yeah.
Buckingham. There's Huckesson in Delaware.
Do you know how many there are
Cherry Hill.
in the whole country?
In the whole country and in Canada, we're probably coming up on 400 if we're not.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And how many? Do you have any idea? How many customers do you think you have? Like how many people do you think you serve? Like how many people are?
I would say not people I see all the time. Probably north of 10,000, probably.
Wow.
But on an average month, it's probably the points of contact for people coming in is probably in the 1,200, 1,300 people coming in each month.
Do you have any information on like how many people feed birds in the United States or United States and Canada, like in general?
I thought that was. I can only think of it in terms of what I think they say like the spending is. And I think it's about $4 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and way more people feed birds than probably consider themselves to be birders, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. Because I would say I don't know that a lot. Some of our folks probably I don't know if they would consider themselves birders in that sense.
And how much of your business is seed compared to
We're
feeders?
We're a heavy seed store. Different parts of the country, you would have different breakdowns on that. Some of them would be where you maybe some more garden and bath and garden type of stuff. Hummingbird stuff is bigger in certain areas. You know what I mean? But we're a big seed store.
There's mostly the seed, not the
Yeah.
infrastructure, I guess, like the seed.
Yeah. Feeders would obviously be the next biggest thing
Right.
for us. Like suet would be big. But the bath and garden section is not the biggest. Our seed is our bread and butter, for lack of a better.
Like bath or bird bath, not
Yeah,
not like bird themed soaps.
It's your millet and sunflowers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So bath and garden would be bird baths and that type of stuff for us, and then but we folks love feeding birds, and it's an awesome thing.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. Thank you. I'm glad I could come out and
Yeah.
do this with you guys, and appreciate it very much.
Yeah. Cheers.
Come see us, Militia Hill, September 1st, November 15th. Come on up.
Look at this. He
Fort
owns
Washington State Park.
a business, and he's not trying to get you to come and buy seed from him. He's trying to get you to come to
I'm in Hawk Watch
to
mode.
do the thing he does for free and just hang out on Hawk Watch. That's how much this man loves birds. So therefore, you should patronize this store.
All right. Thanks so
guys.
much, guys.
Good night.
Have a good night.